Increasingly, parents are voicing concern over what students are being taught in our public school systems. Are students learning inappropriate things in sex education classes, for example, and is it age appropriate? Should teachers be injecting personal political opinions into the classroom? Well, joining us today to discuss all of this is Jim McMurtry. He is a former teacher and now a 1 BC provincial candidate in the Delta South riding of British Columbia. He also holds a doctorate in the philosophy of education with a specialty in Indigenous history and is the author of The Scarlet Lesson. Jim, welcome to BCN. Great to have you today.
Great. Wonderful to be here, Jeanette.
Thank you. Okay, so Jim, you've been in the news lately for your public comments about the BC Teachers Federation sending out K-12 calendars to schools and union members that referred to July 1st as Land Back Day rather than Canada Day. So can you tell us why you see this as problematic?
Well, it's incredibly problematic, and we'll use three reasons for that. The first is it's just not true. It's not Land Back Day. It's the birthday of Canada, July 1st, 1867. The second thing that is troubling about it is the fact that teachers are not there to propagandize students. They don't understand that that's not their role. And then the third thing is just a repeat again of the one thing that's really upsetting for me, and that is this is not what we do as students at all. We're lying to students. We're taking advantage of them. And we're not only just doing that about politics, we're exploiting them in the area of sexuality, race, even, our in the larger sense, we're giving them a perverted view of our country's history, of our ancestors. So it's part of a much larger problem, which many people would consider to be Canada's woke nightmare, and brought in most prominently by Trudeau in 2015, where we're defaming and demonizing one part of the population, particularly people who look like me.
So white males is what you're saying.
Older, healthy, comfortable, but marginalized, and as said, demonized. I don't think any of the problems that I've had in my career recently would have happened if I didn't have these outward characteristics.
Okay. Does the province of British Columbia and even the BC Teachers Federation have some rules in place that instruct teachers to refrain from teaching their own personal political views in the classroom?
When you are an educator, you are in British Columbia, like in other provinces, but here we call it professional standards. And one of the professional standards, the very first one, is that you are not to, and I spoke about it, but I didn't articulate it well, and that is we're not supposed to exploit student for any advantage, whether it's political, philosophical, economic, sexual. I mean, they're just not supposed to do that. Leave kids alone.
They're so vulnerable.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I lost my job as a teacher. I'm that teacher who stood up and said when the announcement came out about Kamloops that wasn't true and there were no children murdered or missing or there are no graves at residential schools. No kids were buried at residential schools. I said all that over 5 years ago, and I was also the first in Canada to be punished for it. Lost my job and haven't taught since. So since then I've tried to continue to do the one thing I'm not allowed to do, which is to teach, because I am informed on the subject. And I do know, and again, in specific reference to your excellent question, that it is quite rich of my union, the British Columbia Teachers Federation, to abandon me, which they did recently. So they're not defending me anymore against my employer. And they're making up a silly reason saying that it's too costly, or we're not going to win, or whatever. They're not doing it because we're not politically aligned. So what they've done for years, for 3 decades, they took my professional dues, about $2,000 a month, to represent me as their union. And then the one time in my career that I've needed them, they abandoned me. So they're guilty of the professional standards that they themselves created, because 3 of the seats on the BC Teachers Council, which is where the biggest poobahs, the biggest, the most elite people in the profession sit. It's got the BCTF has a very strong voice. So they're in violation of their own standards.
What grade did you teach, Jim?
I taught all grades.
Okay.
And but when I was walked out, within half an hour of saying that there were no murdered students in Kamloops.
So you were responding to a student's remarks. Is that what had happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the students said that I said that I didn't really want to go into demonizing myself, any group, particularly not the Christian churches. And I was asked by the principal. I was teaching Calculus 12 to students where I was a substitute teacher for the day. And the principal got on the loudspeaker and asked all the teachers to speak about residential schools because Kamloops had just dropped May 31st, 2021. And it's hard for me because I'm a published writer on this subject. And I said, well, I just want to say that those that died while in enrollment at residential schools did so from many things, but largely from disease like tuberculosis. And that ignited something that, well, again, not only ended my career, but my reputation. It threw me away out of work at a time when my wife can't work because of cancer. So there's been very strong personal ramifications. But on a positive note, I have never had before an audience like this. I'm usually speaking in front of 25 to 30 bored teenagers. And now I feel my audience with close to 30,000 followers on X and being in documentaries like the One BC documentary, which people really should see, is being seen by over 1 million, called Making a Killing, about how the reconciliation industry in Canada is a grift. It's just a lot of money in the pocket of a lot of chiefs, accountants, lawyers, publicists, and on and on and on. It's not helping ordinary Indigenous people. And the cost that to Canadians is not $32 billion a year for one small race. It's 2 to 3 times that, depending on the year, because of all the compensation, the liabilities, and so forth. So we're paying up to $100 billion some years for our Indigenous people. And so you would think if we're spending that much money, more, a lot more than national defense, that we try and get it right. And the biggest lie of all, our original sin, is how terrible we have been to work to Indigenous people. And yet when you look at it, you go, well, there's no country in the world that spends anything like Canada on its Indigenous people. Obviously, you have a clash of civilizations, and the European civilization prevailed, and what we've been doing ever since is try to bring them up, to give them the same opportunities. And I don't see there's anything evil in that.
Now it looks like BC's political landscape seems to be quite chaotic these days, and most certainly Indigenous land claims alongside property rights will be a major issue in the next election. And your party, One BC, only has one elected MLA, correct? So
yes,
what do you think needs to happen for your party to win more seats?
Well, I don't think that's the goal. I know that's a strange thing to say. I think the goal is to help the people of British Columbia. It's called One BC for a reason. The name was dreamed up by the one MLA, the leader of the party, Dallas Brody, and she really believes that everybody in British Columbia matters and is of equal dignity, and that there's a lot that we could do to make lives better for people in the province. And this focus on race is not only a distraction, but it's something that's making it very difficult for us to unleash what British Columbia, like Alberta, is obviously very rich in natural resources and highly educated population with very intelligent people from around the world. And we seem to be lost. We're down this rabbit hole of remaking with the past. The past in Canada said, again, there's no country in the world that gives as much Indigenous people as Canada. There should be nothing but people saying, look what we've done, and we're going to even do more. We're going to build on this, and we're going to make them full participants in society. But British Columbia right now is going to be a very impoverished and a very unhappy place, and ultimately a violent place. If you say, because this is the history of the world, in the Communist Revolution of 1917 showed that if you take all the land away from the rich farmers, called the kulaks, and give it to those who are less capable, who have less, and in many cases for a reason have less, you give it to them and say, okay, this is the new British Columbia. What you're doing is you're going to say those who are best at producing wealth are no longer in a position to do that. And those who are not in a good position to produce that wealth are the ones that are in control. I don't think it makes any sense to have a democracy where things aren't done on merit. We're against the reconciliation industry. All British Columbians are equal. We're against people losing private property or against the loss of Crown land. And people want this to be over. We want all people, Indigenous or non-Indigenous British Columbia, to have the brightest future possible. And it's not going to work if we perpetuate this race war.
Yeah. Jim, I know there was a lot to unpack here, and we're out of time, so we can't dive into everything. But thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Wonderful being with you. Thank you, Jeanette.
Jim McMurtry is a former teacher and now a 1 BC provincial candidate in the Delta South riding of British Columbia.